Creating emails in Rails has always been a bit of a mystery to me. I read various articles on this subject, but they always seem either out of date or incomplete. So I'm going to give you a brief introduction to the mailer, and hopefully it'll clear some things up. Here I have a user's controller with a create action, so this is a registration page basically. And when the user registers, I want a confirmation email to be sent out to the user. So it'll go right here after the user validation passes. Now to set this up, I first need to configure the environment. And you can do that in a config directory, in environments directory. You can find 3 files which are the different configurations for the different environments in Rails. I'm going to set up the development environment. Now I already set up some options in here. This raise delivery errors, it defaults to, it's usually set to false in this folder, in this file. But here I want it set to true. This is basically telling Rails when an error does occur while we're sending an email to raise that error so that we can be notified of it. Otherwise it'll just ignore it silently. Another option is the delivery method. You can use either SMTP, which is probably what you'll want to use. There's also sendmail, so that you can have your local host, your local computer, actually do the delivering if you set up sendmail properly. Or you can use test, which is in the test environment, and that basically doesn't follow through on the delivery. It just sets up the email and then doesn't actually deliver it. And then if you are using SMTP, set up some SMTP settings like this, just to configure it so that it can talk to the SMTP server. Now that you have your configuration set up, you need to create a mailer. Now this is what Rails uses to send emails and to prepare them. So I'm going to use a script generate mailer, and then you need to give the mailer a name. So I'm just going to call this user mailer. Now usually I just create one mailer for the entire Rails application. It's kind of ridiculous to split them up and to organize them unless you have a lot of email you're sending out. But here I'm just calling it user mailer because most of the emails revolve around the user model. And you can also pass other options to this to specify the different emails that are going to be sent. But I don't recommend doing that because that is kind of a little bit out of date with the current way of sending emails in Rails. So just do a base generator like this. Now notice a couple things. One is that it creates a user mailer folder in the views directory, which is kind of odd, it may seem at first, and it creates a models user mailer file. So I don't really think user mailer is a model, but I guess Rails doesn't have any better place to put it, so it just throws it in the models directory. So let's go to that user mailer file. And then we need to create an action or a method in here for each kind of email we want to send. So I want to do a registration confirmation. Now this can take any kind of parameters you want. So you're basically defining a method here to take any parameters. So I'm going to have it take a user model for a parameter, and you can add as many parameters as you want to take. And then when you trigger this mailer, you'll need to pass those parameters to this method. And then you need to set up the email. You need to define the recipients, which I want to be just the user email address. And you can of course pass multiple email addresses here if you want, so make sure to use recipients plural. And then you can use set the from address. So I'm just going to say and then set a subject line. And then set a body. Now this body can be a string, as you see, but a string gets kind of messy because usually emails are fairly complex and you don't want to have this big honking string in Ruby code here. So instead of doing that, you can use a template, and I'll get into that. To do that, you basically just pass a hash to this instead of a string. And this is defining what variables you're passing to the template. So we can call user, pass the user variable to this body, and then that variable will be available to the template. Now the template is in the app views directory. You need to create a file, an RHTML view file in here for the user mailer folder. So it's very similar to how controllers and views work, where each action here or each email has its own template file. And it needs to be the same name, so registration confirmation .rhtml. And then you can use that variable as an instance variable here. So you can say user.name, and then of course write the entire email here. So that's how you use templates with a mailer. Now, as far as how to deliver this email, because we've set it up so that this is how the email we want it to look. But as far as delivering it in the controller create action here, to do that, you just call user mailer. So you act on the class, and then you call deliver, and then the name of the email you want to deliver. So in this case, it's registration confirmation. And then you need to pass the same parameters that you have it accept over here. So we need to pass the user to it. So you don't really call this method directly. You're just calling deliver and then the rest of the method. And that's how sending emails works inside of Rails. That's just a quick 101 crash course to it. But there's a lot more to it as well. And I recommend probably the best documentation I've seen is on the Rails API for a change, because most of the other documentation is a little bit out of date. It uses instance variables for defining the subject, body, and recipients and so on. And I think using these methods is the newer way to do it, and is much cleaner as well. So check out the api.rubyonrails.org documentation for more details on how to create emails. Hey, do me a favor and check out our sponsor, peepcode.com. They make excellent Ruby on Rails screencasts, so it should be right up your alley.